The first thing Riley Kane heard was the beeping. Not one monitor, not one patient. A whole chorus of machines, each with its own rhythm, crowding the air of Harbor Crest Medical Center's emergency department. Overhead lights glared off polished floors. The smell of antiseptic battled with stale coffee and the faint trace of sweat soaked into scrubs. A paramedic shouted for a gurney. Somewhere behind Riley, a baby wailed. A voice on the intercom called a rapid response to room 12. For a second, everything blurred into one long, pulsing noise. Riley did what she always did. She split the chaos into lines. Man on the left with cyanosis around the lips. Teenager clutching her stomach, eyes huge. Woman in a wheelchair, ankles swollen, arguing with the triage nurse. 2 EMTs rolling in a middle-aged man who gripped his chest like he could hold his heart inside by force. She took it all in with a single sweep of her eyes, then moved. "Ma'am, tip your chin up for me." She slid 2 fingers under the cyanotic man's jaw, keeping his airway open, while an oxygen mask settled over his face. Nice slow breaths. In, out. Good. She pivoted to the next. Hands steady, voice low, never raising it over the noise unless she had to. She threaded an IV into the teenager's arm tape, neat and firm, then helped swing the chest pain patient onto a bed as a doctor rushed in with a portable EKG. "New girl moves fast," one of the older nurses muttered somewhere behind her. "Like she has a twin." Riley did not turn. There was no twin. There was just muscle memory that never forgot what it had learned under very different lights. "Can someone grab another line set for room 5? Someone called. "I got it," Riley answered without looking up. Her badge still had that new plastic shine, Riley Kane RN Emergency. The photo underneath showed a woman with hair pulled tight, eyes a little too sharp for the camera, like she had been waiting for something to explode. Today, a few curls had escaped and stuck to her forehead. Sweat beaded at the back of her neck, caught under the elastic of her scrub top. On her wrist, just above her watch, the edge of a tattoo peeked out when she reached. A curve of ink that suggested an ear, a jawline the hint of fur. She tugged the sleeve back down out of habit. "Code Blue Trauma 2. Code Blue Trauma 2. The voice on the intercom cut through the chatter. A trauma team sprinted past her with a crash cart. The wheels squealed. Someone swore when a tray nearly tipped. The air shifted charged, as if the whole department took one held breath and then let it out at a run. In the middle of that rush, certain things vanished. Anyone who did not yell, anyone who did not bleed where people could see. Riley fetched the line set, dropped it into the hands of a nurse in room 5, then stepped back into the hallway, eyes scanning automatically. That was when she saw the first drop. Just a pinhead of red on the pale tile tucked into the corner where the wall met the floor near the bank of vending machines. If she had been moving a little faster or turned a little sooner, she would have missed it. She stopped. The rest of the corridor kept going. A resident brushed past her shoulder without apology. A transporter pushed an empty bed by the vinyl squeaking. The intercom announced a visitor paging a patient. Riley took a small step toward the vending machines. Another drop waited a few inches from the first. Darker, thicker. Not the smear from a scraped knee. The kind of blood that trickled from a wound that needed more than a bandage. The old man sat in the shadow of the machines, exactly where the ceiling lights did not quite reach. He had wedged his chair between a soda dispenser and a supply cabinet, a place no one chose on purpose. His shirt sleeve was rolled up. A hotel towel was wrapped clumsily around his forearm, bright white turned rust red. Blood had soaked through, spreading in a bloom that kept widening. His fingers were stiff where they held the towel in place. He did not wave. He did not call out. His gaze drifted over the hallway like he was watching a storm through glass. "Ma'am," a tech crashed out of a room behind Riley, nearly bumping her. "Can you move? We got a bed coming through." Riley stepped just far enough aside for the empty gurney to pass, then angled herself right back toward the vending machines. The old man's eyes finally tracked to her face. Up close, his age settled into his skin, deep lines around his mouth, a network of fine cracks at the corners of his eyes. There was something about how he sat, though. Not slumped, not folded in. His spine held a line that looked strangely familiar. "Sir," Riley said. Her voice softened in a way it never did with the monitors and alarms. She lowered herself into a crouch beside him, the floor cold under the thin soles of her shoes. "That towel is soaked," she said. "Mind if I take a look underneath it?" He seemed almost surprised to be addressed. Then his mouth tipped into a small, rueful smile. "Didn't want to be a bother," he said. His voice had a roughness that belonged to someone who had spent years outside shouting over engines or waves. "Place looks busy." "It is," Riley said. "You are still bleeding." His gaze flicked past her shoulder. Another gurney flashed by in the corner of his vision. His fingers tightened on the towel. "Lot of folks worse off than me," he said. A shout from the nurse's station broke sharp through the air. A phone rang. Somewhere metal clattered to the floor. Riley stayed where she was. Up close, She could see the way the blood had seeped between the old man's knuckles, filling the creases of his skin. The towel had started to cool, on the outside dark and heavy, but a warmer patch was still spreading near the center. Maybe, she said quietly. Maybe not. Either way, you do not have to leak all over my hallway. It was a small joke, but a real one. It tugged one corner of his mouth higher. You talk like someone who has mopped up a lot of messes, he said. You have no idea, Riley replied. Her knees protested as she rose. She glanced down the hall. The charge nurse was locked in debate with triage over a bed assignment. No one was looking toward the vending machines. Can you stand if I help you? Riley asked. The old man nodded. She slid a hand under his elbow. His muscles were wiry beneath loose skin, the kind that only came from work, not gyms. When he pushed himself up, he winced, but he did not make a sound. They shuffled together toward the nearest open bay. It was not truly empty. There were used gloves in the trash, and a blood pressure cuff hanging half unrolled from the wall. Compared to the rest, though, it was a pocket of quiet. As Riley settled him on the bed, a supervisor passing by gave her a quick, disapproving look, the kind that said, "This is not what you have been assigned." Riley ignored it. She snapped on fresh gloves, the powder clinging to the lines in her skin, and reached for a pair of trauma scissors. Hold that towel a second longer for me, she said. I am going to clean this up. The old man watched her eyes more alert now. You sure you've got time for an old guy who walked into a kitchen cabinet? He asked. Riley positioned a basin beneath his arm. If you are bleeding in my ER, she said, I have time. She peeled the towel back in one smooth motion. The cut was worse than the towel had suggested. It tracked across the meat of his forearm, deep and jagged, the edges already beginning to swell. When the air hit it, fresh blood welled up and spilled over, warm and bright. For a heartbeat, the sight flashed over something else in her mind. Not tile, but dirt. Not fluorescent light, but harsh sun. A different arm, a different wound, dust clinging to blood. Riley blinked once. The vision broke. She reached for saline, for gauze, for the small tray where someone had left a suture kit ready and sealed. Her hands moved without hunting for anything. Each item landed exactly where she needed it on the metal stand. The old man's eyes tracked her fingers. You are quick, he said. Quicker than most. Riley did not answer. She soaked a wad of gauze and began to irrigate the wound, cool liquid washing out diluted red. The smell of blood rose iron sharp, even under the antiseptic. He watched her work, then said more softly, You stitch like someone who has done this in dirt and sand instead of clean sheets. The saline bottle paused in her hand for half a second. She did not look up. Try to keep still, sir, she said. This is going to sting. She set the bottle down, reached for the sealed suture pack, and snapped it open. The suture needle lay in the sterile pack, small and curved, reflective under the light. Her gloved fingers picked it up like they knew it before they remembered anything else. Riley threaded it, the monofilament catching only once, before sliding clean through the eye. She clamped the needle holder, tested the bite, with a tiny click. The old man watched every movement. You sure you are allowed to do all that? He asked. His tone was casual, but his eyes were sharp. Riley reached for more gauze. She dabbed away the fresh well of blood, exposing the edges of the wound. You want the honest answer, or the chart-friendly one, sir? Surprise me. Honest, she said. You need stitches. You are not getting them fast enough. A passing nurse peeked in and hesitated. Riley, who is that? She asked. Walk in, Riley said. Forearm laceration. He has been sitting by the vending machines bleeding for a while. The nurse glanced at the towel in the trash, the red smear inside it, then at the clock on the wall. Her mouth flattened. Triage did not log him. That is the problem, Riley said. Can you at least put his name in the system while I close this so he is not invisible twice? The nurse opened her mouth like she wanted to ask another question, then closed it again, nodded, and left. Riley looked back at the old man. Name, sir! His lips twitched. There was the smallest pause like he was picking from a list. Tom, he said finally. Tom Reed. All right, Tom, she said. I'm going to numb this first. You will feel a pinch. The lidocaine burned under his skin. He grunted low but did not pull away. Riley waited a few seconds, then tested the edge with a gentle tap of the needle. Can you feel that? Not much, he said. You are good at this. She said nothing. Her first stitch went in clean. Needle and twist of the wrist, pull through. The skin obeyed, coming together in a neat line. She tied the knot with practiced movements, cut the excess thread, moved to the next. Her world narrowed to a strip of skin, a curve of metal, the rhythm of her own breath. Voices swelled and faded outside the curtain. Someone laughed. The printer at the nurse's station spit out new labels. A phone rang until a bored voice finally picked up. The old man's gaze never left her hands. How long have you been here, Riley Kane? He asked. 3 months, she said. Feels longer on the floor, I bet. Feels like a lot of things. The curtain jerked open. It was not the nurse from triage. It was Dr. Patel, one of the attending physicians, tablet in hand, scanning the beds as he walked past. He stopped short when he saw the open suture tray. "Kane," he said, frowning. "What are you doing?" Riley did not rush. She finished the knot, then glanced up briefly. "Closing his wound." "Who authorized you to suture?" His voice rose enough that heads outside turned. Riley kept her tone steady. "He has a deep laceration with active bleeding. He has been sitting in the hallway at least 20 minutes without care. Triage did not register him. I am fixing that." "That is not what I asked." Patel stepped fully into the bay. "You are an RN. You are not credentialed for invasive procedures without a physician order. Did someone give you an order?" She made one more careful pass with the gauze to check for leaks. "No, I saw a patient who needed immediate closure." "You do not make that call," Patel said. His voice cut through the constant hum. People nearby began to slow listening. "Put the needle down." Tom shifted slightly on the bed. "Doc, she is doing fine," he said. "Hurts less already." "Sir, I will be with you once we resolve this," Patel said without looking at him. Riley kept her eyes on Tom's arm. Only 2 stitches left. She could see the way the edges would line up, the way the scar would sit. "If I stop now," she said, "he will keep bleeding. The towel was saturated. He is older, potentially on blood thinners. Leaving this open while we argue is not safer." Patel took a step closer. The space between them tightened. "I'm telling you to stop," he said. Riley tied the next knot. Her chest felt tight, but her fingers did not falter. "You can file the write-up," she said quietly. "I will sign it. One more and I am done." The silence that followed pulled the air out of the bay. Someone coughed near the nurse's station. The printer spit out another wristband. A tech froze in the doorway, a stack of linens in her arms. Patel stared at her for one heartbeat too. Then he turned his head toward the hallway. Dr. Mercer. The name traveled faster than the man. Riley could feel people shift outside the curtain. The charge nurse's voice dropped. Another attending muttered under his breath. Riley finished the last stitch. The cut was closed. The skin lay in a clean line, interrupted only by the neat, spaced bites of thread. She released the needle holder with a small click, set it on the tray, and finally looked up. Dr. Leonard Mercer appeared at the curtain, flanked by the supervisor from earlier. His white coat hung perfectly straight. His tie was centered. There were no smudges on his glasses. His eyes went straight to the suture tray, then to the old man's arm, then to Riley. "Nurse Kane," he said. "Step away from the patient, please." Riley let go of Tom's wrist. She took one step back, hands lifted slightly to show they were clear. "Doctor," she said. Mercer moved into the bay, the supervisor and Patel close behind. It felt crowded, but no one else came closer. Their presence alone kept the others hovering right outside the curtain line. "This patient," Mercer said, looking at Tom, "came in when—" "Not long ago," Tom said. "I sat where the machines are. Did not want to make noise." "Is he registered in the system?" Mercer asked. "She asked someone to enter my name," Tom said. "Do not know if they did." Mercer looked at Patel. "Is there an order for the suturing of this wound?" he asked. "No," Patel said. "I walked by and found her mid-procedure. I told her to stop. She did not." Mercer turned back to Riley. "Is that accurate?" he asked. Riley met his eyes. "He was bleeding through a towel," she said. "He had been missed in triage. There were no open physicians. I acted to control the bleeding and close the wound." "That is not what I asked," Mercer said. His voice stayed calm, which somehow made it worse. "Did you continue to perform a procedure after a supervising physician instructed you to stop?" "Yes," Riley said. Her throat felt dry. "If I had walked away, then the wound would have reopened. Hemostasis was not secure." Mercer exhaled through his nose a slow, measured breath. He folded his hands in front of him as if composing himself for an audience. "Nurse Kane," he said louder now. "You have been here 3 months. During that time, you have received written counseling on 2 occasions regarding deviations from protocol." The words floated out of the bay and into the hallway. People heard them and did not move closer, but they did not move away either. "In both prior instances," Mercer continued, "you justified your actions with versions of the same argument. You believed you knew better than established procedure." "I believed the patient needed immediate intervention," Riley said. "Today," Mercer went on, still not raising his voice, "you performed a procedure you are not credentialed to perform without a physician order on a patient who was not yet registered, and you continued even when a physician instructed you to stop." Riley unclasped her hands, then clasped them again. Her gloves were still streaked with diluted pink. "Sir, she said, I am responsible for the patients in my care. He was in my hallway. No one saw him. He was losing blood. I stopped it." "You are not a combat medic here," Mercer said sharply, the first crack in his tone. "You are a nurse in a civilian hospital. You have a scope of practice. You stayed within it, or you leave." Tom's head jerked slightly at the phrase combat medic. Riley did not move. "So," Mercer said, "you leave." The sentence landed heavy and solid. For clear and repeated disregard of established protocol, Mercer said each word distinct, effective immediately, your employment at Harbor Crest Medical Center is terminated. The curtain had not moved, but somehow the hallway seemed to press closer. A tech in the doorway dropped a rolled blood pressure cuff. It bounced once on the floor. No one bent to pick it up. Riley blinked. The lights hummed overhead. The smell of antiseptic was suddenly too sharp. She did not ask him to reconsider. She did not ask for a meeting or a review. Somewhere deep in her chest, the shape of this moment was familiar, even if the setting was not. Tom pushed himself up on his elbows. "That is it?" he asked, looking from Mercer to Patel. "You fire the one person who actually stopped the bleeding." "Sir," Mercer said, his patience visibly fraying. "We appreciate that you were treated promptly. However, you are not aware of the full context. Please lie back. You may be lightheaded." "I'm not confused," Tom said. Mercer gave him a brief, tight smile that did not reach his eyes. "Of course," he said. "Nonetheless, you need to rest. The physician will assess your injury fully now." He turned to Riley. "Kindly remove your badge and leave the clinical area," he said. "Security will escort you if necessary." "No need," Riley said. Her voice sounded far away in her own ears. She peeled off her gloves, one then the other, and dropped them into the sharps bin. They landed on top of a small pile of used gauze and plastic. The streaks of pink and red disappeared into the rest. Her hand went to her chest. The badge came free of its clip with a soft snap. Riley Kane were an emergency. The photo stared back at her just for a second, then she placed the badge carefully on the metal counter beside the suture tray. Tom watched her, his jaw tight. "Thank you," he said quietly. Riley nodded once. She stepped out of the bay. Conversations that had gone silent when Mercer spoke did not start again. People moved aside just enough for her to pass. No one met her eyes for long. At the nurse's station, the computer still showed her login in the corner of the screen. Someone reached past her to click out of it without saying anything. The hallway to the staff area felt longer than usual. Her shoes squeaked softly on the tile. Behind her, the intercom called another code to another room. The ER swallowed its own noise and kept moving, with or without her. Riley pushed through the staff-only door and let it close behind her. The latch clicked, muting the beeping and shouting to a distant, muffled hum. The staff room was always colder than the rest of the department. Riley felt it the moment the door closed behind her and the sound of the emergency ward dropped to a dull, distant hum. The fluorescent lights in here were softer, less clinical. A refrigerator buzzed in the corner. Someone had left a half-eaten salad on the table, plastic fork still stuck upright. There was a bulletin board with a faded flyer about a charity run. Another about yoga for burnout, the corners curling away from the pins. Riley walked past all of it and went straight to the lockers. They stood in two tight rows, metal doors painted in indifferent gray. Her locker was near the middle, the number already memorized by hands that liked having something solid to grab onto. She spun the dial, feeling the familiar click of each number, then pulled. The door stuck for a second, then popped open with a soft rasp. Inside, her life at Harbor Crest took up very little space. A spare pair of navy scrubs folded on the top shelf, a lunch container with her name written in permanent marker on the lid, a travel mug with a chipped rim, a small plain notebook. She reached for the lunch first. The container was still cool from the fridge. She had not had time to eat. That was normal. Today it felt unnecessary in a different way. The notebook slid forward when she tugged the lunch free. It tipped, landed face up. The elastic band that usually held it closed had loosened over time, and the cover fan just done just enough for one page to show. Riley stilled. On the exposed page, drawn in ballpoint pen, in the gaps between notes, a wolf stood at the edge of a line of tall trees. Its head was raised, nose tilted toward some invisible sky. No other animals, no pack behind it, just the single shape and the suggestion of snow under its paws. Her thumb brushed the corner of the page. The ink had smudged in one place where a fingertip had rested too long during the sketch. She snapped the notebook shut and tucked it into the cardboard box that sat on the bench beside her. She added the lunch, the chipped mug, the spare scrubs. Each object made a soft, muted sound as it settled. This was not the first time someone had told her she had gone too far. It was not the first time doing what seemed obvious had cost her more than it made sense to lose. That knowledge did not seem to make this moment lighter. She closed the locker door. The thin metal met the frame with a hollow clang that echoed in the small room. Her reflection stared back faintly in the painted surface. The fluorescent light caught the damp at her hairline, the small shine on her cheeks where sweat had dried. She adjusted the strap of the cardboard box against her hip and turned away. The hall from the staff room to the main entrance was shorter than the one back to the emergency ward. It made no turns, just a straight line past a few empty consulting rooms and a stack of folded linens on a cart. The carpet here was newer, darker, meant for visiting families, not gurneys. Riley walked it slowly. With each step, the sounds from the emergency department thinned. The monitor beeps softened, the shouted orders turned to a vague rise and fall, and then even that faded, replaced by the hush of the public lobby. She stepped through a final doorway and found herself in front of the main entrance. Automatic glass doors waited, their sensors ready. The lobby chairs lined in careful rows were half filled with people clutching purses, jackets, paper cups of coffee. A child turned a plastic dinosaur over in his hands again and again. No one looked at her twice. Her badge was gone from her chest. Without it, she could have been a visitor, another person who had carried a cardboard box into a building and would carry it out again. The doors opened the moment she approached. A strip of cool air hit her face, then gave way to a heavier warmth. Outside midday sat on the parking lot with its full weight. Sunlight bounced off windshields and the white paint of the curb. Heat rose from the dark asphalt, carrying with it the smell of rubber and oil. Beyond the rows of cars, the faint scent of the bay threaded through salt and something metallic. Riley lowered the box into the open passenger seat of her car. The upholstery stuck slightly to the cardboard. A corner of the notebook pressed against the side, the cover edge barely visible. Her hospital badge lay on the seat where she had dropped it earlier that morning before her shift. She had never liked wearing it in the car. It caught on the seatbelt and dug into her collarbone. Now the plastic rectangle lay face up beside the box, the photo watching the ceiling. She stood with one hand on the top of the door frame, the other on the edge of the door, and let herself breathe. Inside her chest, something uncoiled and something else tightened. The absence of noise from the emergency ward felt wrong and right at the same time. No one shouting her name, no one asking for a second pair of hands, no one telling her she had gone too far. For a moment, the world narrowed to the rectangle of sky over the parking lot and the line of palm trees beyond the hospital, their fronds trembling in the breeze. The trembling did not stay in the trees. A faint vibration touched the soles of her feet. At first, it was so slight that she thought it was her pulse or the car cooling behind her. Then it came again, stronger, a tiny shudder that ran through the door under her hand. Riley frowned and looked up. The palm fronds shook harder, not in rhythm with the breeze. A loose paper cup rolled along the curb, then tipped over. Somewhere near the entrance, someone dropped a set of keys. They clinked against concrete louder than they should have. A sound followed that did not belong to traffic or the far-off horns from the bay. It started low and distant like a horn underwater, then grew as it pushed closer. The thumping became individual beats, steady and fast. The air grew heavier the way it did before storms or in the rotor wash of machines she had not let herself think about in years. Voices rose behind her. "What is that? Is that coming here?" Riley turned enough to glance back toward the glass front of the hospital. People inside the lobby had moved toward the doors, hands shaded eyes, a few pressed phones to the glass already filming. A child pointed upward, mouth open, words swallowed by the thickening noise. The first gust of rotor wash hit a second later. It pushed warm air across the lot, lifting loose wrappers, tugging at the edges of jackets. Riley's hair, tied back for her shift, lifted at the ends. The sound filled the space above the hospital, deep and insistent. She stepped away from the car and out from under the partial shelter of the small overhang drawn by old instinct more than curiosity. Above the building, the silhouette of a helicopter cut across the hard blue of the sky. It was not the life flight bird that sometimes came in for critical transfers, bright colors and hospital logos. This one was gray, long-bodied, with the angular confidence of a machine built for long distances and rough landings. As it angled lower, the markings on its side caught the light. United States Navy. The letters were stark against the paint. The helicopter dropped toward the flat rectangle of the hospital roof. Wind hammered at the building. The branches of the palm trees bent. Car alarms chirped in brief protest, then quieted as the machines reset. Riley squinted against the glare. The sun found every reflective surface at once. Nurses in scrubs pressed up against the third-floor windows, their faces pale ovals behind glass. Visitors shielded their eyes with upturned hands. A security guard stepped out of the sliding doors and stopped, forgotten words dying on his tongue. The rotors spun faster as the pilot adjusted the final approach. The sound was everywhere now, in concrete and glass and the cavity of the chest. Riley realized that her hand had tightened on the door without her noticing. Her knuckles pressed white against the metal. The old reflexive cataloging started in the back of her mind, uninvited. Model weight, probable crew number, standard protocols for a rooftop landing on a civilian structure. Possible reasons a Navy aircraft would choose this instead of its own base a few miles down the coast. None of the reasons that occurred to her settled easily. The helicopter settled onto the roof in a storm of dust and paper. The blades kept turning, beating the air into hot turbulence that swirled down the sides of the building. For a moment, everything else in the parking lot seemed to lean toward that noise. Riley stood beside her car, with one hand on the open door, eyes fixed on the edge of the roof, waiting to see who would climb out. On the roof, the wind hit first. Hot air churned in chaotic circles as the helicopter settled its weight onto the square of concrete. Paper wrappers and a forgotten surgical cap skittered toward the edge, then snagged on the safety railing. A crewman inside the open side door signaled to the pilot, hand-raised fingers tight. The rotors spun down just enough to make speech possible. The man who stepped out did not hesitate. He wore dress whites crisp despite the wind, the row of ribbons on his chest catching sunlight in small, hard flashes. His hair had gone more silver than dark, cut short against his skull. A faint scar pulled one corner of his mouth when he pressed his lips together. Admiral Nathan Cole crossed the roof with the kind of purposeful stride that rearranged the paths of people in front of him. Two sailors followed in his wake, uniforms, darker faces, younger eyes, scanning out of habit. A respiratory therapist stood near the stairwell door, mouth open. She had been the first one brave enough to come up when the helicopter called in its landing. She watched Cole approach, tried to remember her hospital script, then forgot it when he stopped in front of her. "You with the hospital?" Cole asked. "Yes," she said. Her voice came out thin. She swallowed and tried again. "Yes, sir. Harbor Crest Medical. I am, Jenna." He nodded once, accepting the information and discarding everything but what he needed. "Access to the main floor?" he asked. "Emergency department and administration." She pointed to the stairwell door. Her hand shook just enough to make the keys jingle. "This way. It is faster than the staff elevator." Cole pushed the door open before she could. The smell of concrete and cleaning solution hit his face. The stairwell swallowed the last of the rotor noise as the door swung shut behind them. His boots took the stairs two at a time. The two sailors behind him matched his pace without being asked. Jenna followed as best she could. On the second landing, they passed a nurse in teal scrubs carrying a stack of blankets. She flattened herself against the wall, eyes widening as the admiral and his shadowed rank slid past. By the time Cole reached the ground floor, the lobby was already buzzing. The helicopter had done that. News traveled faster than any internal memo ever could. People who would usually stay at their desks found reasons to walk past the main desk. Visitors stayed a little longer in their chairs, craning their necks. A security guard who had been on his way outside stopped inside the door instead. Near the center of it all, Dr. Leonard Mercer strode forward, tie still perfectly aligned, coat still perfectly pressed, but his jaw fixed a little too tight. "This is a private medical facility," Mercer said briskly as Cole stepped into the open lobby. "You cannot just land aircraft on our roof without coordination through proper channels. If there is an emergency, the Life Flight Service in San Diego County has its own protocol. Whoever authorized this should have notified my office." Cole did not slow. His gaze swept the lobby once. His eyes weighed exits counted, staff took in the layout as if it were a new building on a foreign base. Only then did he direct his attention to the man who had spoken. "You are in charge here," Cole said. It was not quite a question. Mercer straightened. "Yes, Dr. Leonard Mercer, Hospital Director." Cole gave a short nod. "Admiral Nathan Cole, United States Navy," he said. "I'm not here about your air traffic. I am here for one of your people." Mercer let out a small controlled breath. It was almost relief. "If this is about a billing matter or a malpractice complaint," he began, "those are handled through administration. We can schedule an appointment. Today is not exactly ideal." "It is about a nurse," Cole said. His voice cut clean through the last threads of Mercer's sentence. "Riley Kane." The sound of her name rippled through the nearby staff like a dropped pebble in water. The charge nurse from the emergency department who had moved forward with the others stopped. A tech clutching a stack of charts froze. The security guard shifted, remembering the woman who had just walked out with a cardboard box. Mercer blinked. "Nurse Kane has been terminated," he said, "effective immediately." There was no pause, no hesitation. The words came quickly as if he was accustomed to delivering them and believed in them deeply. Cole's eyes narrowed just a fraction. "You fired her," he said. Mercer folded his hands, the gesture calm, almost instructional. "She repeatedly violated protocol," he said. "Today she performed an invasive procedure outside her scope of practice without an order and in direct defiance of a physician's instruction. We cannot allow that kind of uncontrolled autonomy in this institution. It creates liability and undermines the chain of care." The phrases sounded polished. He had used them before. Cole's jaw flexed. "In this institution," he repeated slowly. Mercer missed the weight in his tone. "Correct," Mercer said. "We have standards. No matter what she may have done before coming here within these walls, she is or was simply a nurse." "Simply," Cole said. The word hung between them for a heartbeat. Behind Mercer, near the edge of the lobby, a gurney waited with an older man seated on it. His freshly bandaged arm rested in his lap. A well-placed pillow supported the elbow. An orderly stood at the head, one hand on the railing. Tom Reed watched the exchange with an expression that no longer belonged to a confused patient. He did not speak yet. His gaze moved from Cole to Mercer to the cluster of staff, then back to Cole. Recognition had settled in his features the moment the Admiral stepped into view, but he had kept quiet, as if he wanted to see how far this would go on its own. Cole shifted his attention just enough to acknowledge him, then returned his focus to Mercer. "You are aware," Cole said, "that Riley Kane is not just a nurse." Mercer pulled his chin back slightly. "I am aware," he said, "that whatever military background she has, it does not change the fact that this is a civilian hospital. Her previous service does not give her the right to ignore the rules here." Cole stepped closer. The lobby seemed to tilt toward him, conversations shrinking down to whispers or nothing. "Her previous service, he said, includes 6 deployments with Naval Special Warfare Units. It includes decorated actions under fire. It includes holding the line at Ravenfall Ridge when an entire operation collapsed around her and your country forgot that any of them were there." A resident at the edge of the group frowned, trying to place the name. Another staff member, older, turned pale. Mercer opened his mouth, then shut it again. Cole did not give him room to find a reply. "Riley Kane," Cole said, "served as a SEAL medic, call sign Lone Wolf. In the ambush at Ravenfall Ridge, her unit was overrun. Comms were cut. Air support was delayed. She kept 6 men breathing for 2 hours, under direct fire. She patched wounds in the dirt with whatever she could reach. She finished the objective when the rest of her team could not. Do you know how many walked out because of her?" No one answered. The woman at the front desk had set her phone down without realizing it. The child with the plastic dinosaur in the waiting chairs had stopped playing and stared at Cole, uncomprehending but still caught. "1," Cole said. "Officially, 1." He let the word sink in. "She carried the weight of that number." He went on quieter now, but somehow more dangerous. "So clearly that she left the Navy believing she had failed the rest. She did not. We failed them. We failed her." Mercer swallowed. A muscle jumped at the corner of his jaw. "With respect, Admiral," he said, the title coming out stiff, "her record does not change the fact that she put this hospital at risk today." Cole stared at him for a long second. "She put herself at risk for you," he said. "Again, she saw a bleeding veteran sitting alone in your hallway, and she did not wait for your paperwork." "Oh, doesn't..." A small murmur ran through the gathered staff. Reed lifted his bandaged arm a little. "He is talking about me," Reed said dryly to the orderly at his side. Then he raised his voice. "In case anyone is curious." The orderly jumped. Several heads turned. Mercer looked over with irritation. "Mr. Reed, you should be in post-procedure observation. This area is for administrative matters." Reed gave him a flat stare. "You know who that is, Doctor?" he asked, tipping his chin toward Cole. "That is Nathan Cole, one of my officers." The word officers hung in the air with a different kind of weight. Cole let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh. "Good to see you upright, sir," he said. The "sir" did not belong to hospital hierarchy. Mercer scanned Reed's face again, and something finally clicked. He had glanced at the intake form earlier and seen a name. Tom Reed. It had been just another set of letters then. "Thomas Reed," he said slowly, "as in Admiral Thomas Reed." The orderly's hand tightened on the gurney rail. A nurse near the wall whispered the name to herself, half memory, half disbelief. She had seen it in a framed photo at the base clinic near the naval station, and in articles shared on social media in a recruitment video 1 year that had made the rounds. Reed lifted one shoulder in a small shrug. "Retired," he said. "Mostly, apparently still capable of wandering into sharp edges." Mercer's face lost some of its color. "I did not realize," he began. Reed cut him off with a look. "What you did not realize, Mizendus," Reed said, "is that the woman you just fired stopped my bleeding before it got worse. She treated me like any of my men. No fuss, no headline. She saw a problem and fixed it while everyone else walked by." Mercer took a step back as if the floor itself had shifted under him. "I had no idea about the connection," he said. "If I had known you were, it would not have mattered to her," Reed said. "That is the point." Silence stretched again. Cole turned back to Mercer and closed the distance between them, so that there were only a few feet and a great many differences in perspective between them. "You judged her badge," Cole said. "Not her history, not her instincts, not the fact that she has saved more lives in worse conditions than you have ever had to imagine." Mercer opened his hands slightly as if to show he had nothing left to hold. "She still broke protocol," he said. It was a weaker statement this time. Cole nodded once. "Yes," he said. "She did. She broke yours to honor the one she lives by." He let that sit for a breath, then asked very simply, "Where is she now?" The question moved through the lobby like a current. The charge nurse shifted, glancing toward the glass doors. The security guard did the same. The orderly's gaze flicked to Paul to the parking lot beyond the entryway where the heat shimmered over the rows of cars. No one spoke, but it did not take words to say it. She had just walked through those doors. For a moment, no one moved. Then Admiral Cole turned on his heel toward the glass doors, and the crowd in the lobby parted in front of him without needing to be asked. The two sailors fell in behind him, their footsteps a half beat off his close enough to follow far enough not to crowd. Reed watched them go. The orderly at his side gripped the gurney handles, unsure. "Take me out there," Reed said. "Sir, you are supposed to be—" "Out there," Reed repeated. His voice had lost any trace of patient softness. "Now." The orderly swallowed and pushed. The automatic doors opened before Cole reached them. Heat and rotor-churned air spilled inside, stirring loose papers on the front desk. The sounds of the emergency ward faded behind him, replaced by open space and the layered noise of the parking lot. Outside the helicopter was a shadow on the roofline. Its rotors had not fully stopped, blades still turning in lazy, powerful circles. The wind they created drifted down in pulses. Riley stood where she had been, next to her car, the passenger door open and the cardboard box resting on the seat. She had one hand on the edge of the door, the other loose at her side. Her hair, half pulled back, lifted and settled with each breath of wind. She was watching the roof when she heard the crunch of boots on asphalt. The sound was not loud. It carried anyway. Her eyes dropped from the roofline and found the small group coming toward her. Two sailors in service uniforms. Between them, a man in dress whites that fit like they had been measured and remeasured until they obeyed. For a second, her mind supplied an image from a different place, a different day. White shapes in desert heat rippling through haze. Command figures that meant extraction or new orders or both. She blinked it away. "Ma'am," one of the sailors said as they drew closer, "are you Riley Kane?" She could have said no. She could have said she was just leaving, that this was a mistake. The answer that came out was simple and true. Yes. The sailor nodded once and stepped aside. The Admiral stopped a few feet from her. Up close, the scar at the corner of his mouth was more visible. His eyes were a sharp, tired blue, like the color had been washed through too many storms. For a brief moment, neither of them spoke. Then he said, "Loam." The name landed somewhere below her ribs. It had not been spoken out loud in years, not by anyone who knew what it meant. On paper, it was a call sign filed away in some system she no longer had access to. In her head, it was a voice on a radio crackling through static while sand blew over gear and the night smelled of cordite and sweat. Here in the bright light of a hospital parking lot, it felt out of place and exactly right at the same time. Riley's fingers tightened on the door. "I do not answer to that anymore," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it did not shake. Cole studied her face, as if matching it to another image in his memory. "You do so," he said, "whether you want to or not." Riley let go of the door and straightened. "You came all this way to argue with a nurse who just lost her job," she said. "That seems like a poor use of Navy fuel." "We did not come for a nurse who just lost her job," Cole said. "We came for the medic who never should have had to trade a uniform for a badge in the first place." She looked past him for a moment toward the road that led down to the bay. Traffic moved like usual. A delivery truck pulled around a corner. Somewhere a car radio played a song too far away to recognize. "I left that life," she said. The door behind them slid open again. The orderly pushed Reed's gurney out onto the sidewalk. The wheels bumped over the lip. Reed squinted against the sun, then lifted his uninjured hand in greeting. "Thought you might need a familiar witness," he said. Riley stared. "You did not tell me your last name," she said. "You did not ask," Reed replied. "You were busy keeping my arm attached." Cole glanced between them. "You treated him like any other walk-in," he said to Riley. "No salute, no special handling. You did not know who he was." "I saw an old man bleeding alone in a corner," Riley said. "That was enough." Reed smiled a small, genuine curve. "That is why I told him to get here faster," he said, jerking his chin toward Cole. Mercer appeared in the doorway behind them, then as if drawn by the gravity of uniforms in his parking lot. He stopped just outside the shade, blinking in the bright. "Admiral," he began, "I believe we can resolve this without creating a scene on the front steps. If we could return inside, there are formal channels and we can discuss Ms. Kane's status. Perhaps we acted hastily. I am prepared to revisit." "Doctor," Cole said without turning, "this conversation stopped belonging to you when you decided her value ended at your door." Mercer pressed his lips together, caught between indignation and the realization that there was very little he could do here that would not make it worse. "I only meant that if her employment was ended as a result of a misunderstanding," he said, "we could review—" Riley spoke before Cole did. "You made yourself clear," she said, looking at Mercer. "You want nurses who follow the rules, you know. That is fair. You have a hospital to protect." Her tone was even. It did not sound like forgiveness. It did not sound like anger either. It simply sounded finished. Mercer looked at her for a long moment, and then, perhaps understanding that there was no path for him in this particular scene that would earn him back control, he stepped back into the shade of the entrance. Reed watched him go, then shifted his attention fully to Riley. "You saved my arm," he said. "Probably a lot more if I had sat there longer. No flinch? No questions about insurance? You saw the bleed. You stopped it. You were sitting where no one could see you," she said. "You did not call for help." His eyes crinkled slightly at the edges. "Sometimes old habits die harder than the people who carry them," he said. Cole cleared his throat. "Riley," he said. She turned back to him. "We have a situation," he said. "A helicopter crew chief was injured during a training evolution off the coast. He has chest trauma and internal bleeding. The shipboard team stabilized him as far as they can. They radioed for additional support and requested a specific medic by name." He let the words sit there. Riley's shoulders stiffened. "There are plenty of qualified Navy medics, Nathan," she said. "You have a whole command of them. You did not need to come poach a civilian nurse who just got thrown out of her ER. That is the thing," Cole said. "They did not ask for just any medic. They asked for you." The rotors on the roof above them turned a little slower, now the sound dropping in pitch. The wind across the parking lot shifted, carrying the salt from the bay more strongly. "How would they even know I'm here?" Riley asked. "I left." "You resigned," Cole said. "You did not vanish. People talk. People pass along names when they matter. Your file may have moved off active duty, but it did not disappear." He looked up at the hospital, then back at her. "And then this morning," he said, "one of our most respected retired officers walked into your ER with a bad cut. You handled it before anyone else noticed he existed. You broke this man's rules to keep Reed from losing more blood. That told me two things. One, your instincts are still intact. Two, this place is not going to be where you belong much longer, whether with or without their permission." "I belong exactly where I can do my job without being used as an example," Riley said. Cole nodded as if he understood that more than she expected. "That is what I'm offering you," he said. "A job where the only example you set is the standard others try to live up to." "You want me to walk back onto a Navy ship and pretend the last 10 years did not happen?" she said. "No," he said. "I want you to bring the last 10 years with you. The losses, the guilt, the nights you did not sleep, all of it. Then I want you to put your hands on another human being who is bleeding and do what you have always done best." She looked down at her fingers. The faint shadows of where the gloves had been clung to her skin. A small line of dried blood had escaped the cuff and marked the inside of her wrist, just below where the hint of the tattoo showed. "You are late," she said quietly. "If you needed me, you should have come before I learned how to live with everything I did not save." Reed shifted on the gurney. "Maybe we are late," he said. "Maybe we should have pulled you back in years ago. Or maybe you needed to be here in rooms with bright lights and coffee stains to remember what you are away from uniform." Riley met his gaze. "What does your crew chief look like right now?" she asked Cole. "Give me numbers." Cole did not smile, but something in his posture eased. This was terrain he knew. "Preliminary report from the ship," he said. "Blunt chest trauma from a hard landing. Suspected flail segment on the left. Hypotension, tachycardia, oxygen saturations drifting down despite high flow. They relieved a tension component, but the bleeding is ongoing. Transport time to shore is longer than he has." Her mind filled in the gaps. Broken ribs moving wrong with every breath, air and blood where they should not be, hands pressing someone counting compressions, another voice yelling over rotor noise and sea spray. "You have surgeons on board," she said. "We have surgeons," Cole said. "We do not have you. The team asked. I am trying to honor that request." Riley looked back at the car. The cardboard box sat on the passenger seat. The notebook was buried under her extra scrubs, and the lunch she no longer wanted. Her hospital badge lay beside them, the photo turned slightly, catching a shaft of sunlight. The life inside this building had already closed behind her. Another waited out past the breakwater on steel and rolling water and the sharp smell of jet fuel. She did not move toward her car. She did not move toward the entrance. She took one step closer to Cole instead. "And if I say no," she asked, "what happens to him?" "We keep doing what we can," Cole said. "Maybe it is enough. Maybe it is not." That was the most honest answer he could have given. Riley let out a slow breath. She looked up at the roof again. The helicopter sat like a waiting animal, rotors still frame-heavy. The path from the parking lot to the stairwell seemed suddenly very clear in her mind, a line drawn between 2 points. Her heart thudded once hard enough that she felt it in her throat. "Then give me a minute," she said. "And on the way up, you are going to tell me everything you are not putting in the brief." Riley closed the passenger door with a soft thud. The cardboard box stayed on the seat. Her badge caught a slant of light and flashed once before the shadow of the car swallowed it. She wiped her palms on her scrub pants and turned back toward Cole. "All right," she said. "Let us go." He gave a small nod that acknowledged more than the words. He turned toward the entrance. The sailors stepped aside for her, letting her walk at his shoulder instead of behind. As they crossed the short stretch of concrete, the automatic doors slid open again. The cool from the lobby brushed her face. The air inside smelled of air conditioning and recycled coffee instead of asphalt and salt. People had not moved far. The cluster of staff that had watched Cole come out had only shifted enough to clear the path. As Riley and the Admiral walked back in, eyes followed them. Some were wide, some guilty, some simply curious. The charge nurse looked like she wanted to say something and could not find what that would be. Mercer stood off to one side now near the front desk. He did not step forward this time. If he spoke, the words did not reach her over the low murmur of the lobby. Riley kept her attention ahead. The reflections in the polished floor showed the white of Cole's uniform and the darker blur of the sailors behind them. Her own scrub top looked strangely out of place between them. Stairs or elevator? Cole asked, his voice low enough not to carry. Stairs, Riley said. Elevators is too slow. He seemed to approve of that answer. They turned away from the main corridor and pushed through a heavy door marked with a red exit sign. The stairwell swallowed the lobby sounds, replacing them with the hollow echo of footsteps on concrete and the faint tang of bleach. Cole took the first flight quickly. Riley kept up pace. The two sailors followed a step behind. Off the record, she said as they climbed. Tell me what you did not put in the neat version. Cole's hand brushed the rail as they turned. The ship is the USS Sentinel, he said. She's running joint exercises in blue water. The crew chief was on an insertion drill when a line fouled. Hard swing into a bulkhead, probably cracked more than a few ribs. They decompressed a tension pneumo. They do not have the blood products to keep playing catch-up if the internal bleed does not slow. How far out? Riley asked. Far enough that shore is not an option, he said. Close enough that a bird from here makes sense if we move now. They reached the next landing. Riley's breath came a little faster from the pace and the heat, but it stayed even. Climbing stairs in a hospital was nothing compared to the ridges and loose rock she had run in other years. Cole's radio clicked on his shoulder. Sentinel actual to ground team, a distorted voice said. Priority update for Admiral Cole. He stopped on the landing. Riley did too. The sailors straightened instinctively. Cole pressed the transmit button. Ground team, he said. Cole? Sir, we just received identification confirmation from the med bay, the voice said. Crew chief is Chief Petty Officer Mason Ward. The name hit harder than the climb. Riley's hand closed around the rail. The cold metal dug into her palm. Ward. There were plenty of wards in the Navy. It was not a rare name. Her mind did not supply a list of all of them. It went straight to one. Mason Ward, squad leader, Ravenfall Ridge. Broad shoulders, easy gait, a voice that sounded like gravel when he was tired and like steel when rounds were incoming. The man who had shoved her down behind a broken wall and taken a piece of shrapnel that would have split her open instead. Her throat went dry. Cole looked at her, then back at the radio. Repeat, he said. Mason Ward, sir, the voice said. Patient is in and out. When awake, he has been asking for someone. He keeps repeating a call sign. Lone Wolf says if she is alive, she will come. The stairwell felt narrower. For a heartbeat, the air smelled like dust and burned fuel instead of bleach. The echo of their footsteps turned into the remembered thud of boots on loose stone. The hiss of the radio in Cole's hand tangled with the hiss of another years ago, with sand whipping at the antenna. Riley forced her lungs to pull in air. This is a mistake, she said. Her voice sounded calmer than she felt. Ravenfall reports listed him as KIA, Cole said quietly. I watched him go down, she said. The ridge, the blast, we lost comms. There was no medevac, there was no one coming. I know, Cole said. The admission hung in the stairwell, heavier than any rank. We believe those reports, he said. Maybe we chose to. There are things about that day that were classified before the dust even settled. Ward was taken off the grid by a group that answers to people higher than me. I saw his name on a memorial wall. I wrote a letter to his family. He tightened his hold on the radio. What I am telling you, he said, is that the man on that ship is Mason Ward. And when he is lucid enough to speak, he asks for you. Riley stared at the numbered metal plate riveted to the wall at their level. He is supposed to be dead, she said. So are you, Cole said. On some early drafts. She almost smiled. It did not quite reach her mouth. On the other end of the radio, the voice waited. Sir, it prompted. Do we have any further instructions? Cole pressed the button again. Keep him alive, he said. Tell him Lone Wolf heard him. He clipped the radio back to his shoulder. Riley let go of the rail. There was a faint impression of the metal still pressed into her skin. Her mind had been built around a single fixed point for 10 years. One survivor, her. Everyone else gone. It was how she had understood the weight she carried. The guilt that settled in her bones when the lights were off. Now that point cracked. You knew him, Cole said. It was not a real question. He was my team lead, she said. He is the reason I walked out instead of being carried on a litter. I saw the blast hit his position. It took half the wall he was behind. We had no comms, no air, no eyes on anything except what was in front of our rifles. She rubbed her hand once against her thigh as if she could wipe off the memory like dried blood. I called in his death, she said. I testified to it. I signed my name on that report. Then you will sign on something else now, Cole said. His chart. The stairwell felt less like a shaft of concrete and more like the throat of a tunnel. At the top, the muffled thrum of the helicopter pressed down through the door. Riley drew in one more deep breath. All right, she said. Let us finish this walk. They climbed the last flight. The roof door pushed open with a resistance that gave way all at once. Heat and light hit them first, then sound. The rotors had slowed, but not stopped. The helicopter squatted on the pad like a gray animal tensed and ready. A crewman in a helmet and headset jogged toward them. Admiral, he called. His voice came out louder than he intended, pushed by the leftover adrenaline of the landing. Bird is green. We have clearance to depart the second you are on. Cole nodded and jerked his head toward Riley. This is Kane, he said. She runs the medical side from here. The crewman looked at her, taking in the scrubs, the bare collar where a badge had been the way she squinted against the wind without flinching. Ma'am, he said. There was no hesitation. We have a basic kit on board. Ship is prepping a bay. They are standing by with what they have, but they were very clear. They want you. What do you have for chest trauma? Riley asked. In the Bird, he said quickly. Needle kits, chest tubes, fluids, no blood. That stays on the ship. Oxygen, portable monitor. We can rig whatever else you call out. Riley stepped closer to the helicopter. The paint on its side was worn at the edges where hands had grabbed it 100 times. The lettering that spelled out its designation had been nicked by salt and sand and then painted over again. The crewman moved to lead her, but she shook her head. I know my way around, she said. She turned back once just enough to catch Cole's eye. You heard his voice, she said. Is he making sense? As much as someone full of morphine and blood loss can, Cole said. The one clear thing he has is your name. Riley nodded. She reached up and tightened the elastic that held her hair. A few strands had come loose and clung to the back of her neck where sweat had gathered. She twisted them back and secured them until nothing moved. Her hand brushed the inside of her wrist. The faint line of the wolf tattoo sat just above where the hospital cuff had been that morning. No plastic circled her arm now. She climbed into the helicopter. The interior smelled of fuel and metal and the faint lingering antiseptic from previous transports. Webbed straps hung from the ceiling. The stretcher bay was empty, waiting for its next occupant. A monitor screen glowed with a test pattern of green lines. One of the sailors handed her a headset. She slipped it on. The roar of the rotor changed, filtered, became a deep, steady flood instead of an assault. Cole climbed in after her and took the seat opposite. The crewmen swung the door in, leaving it half open while the pilot signaled. Through the narrowing gap, Riley could see the edge of the hospital roof, the drop to the parking lot below. Tiny figures stood near the entrance. She could make out the white of Mercer's coat, the darker scrubs of the staff, the small cluster of people who had come outside to watch. One of them held the handle of a gurney with a man seated on it, his bandaged arm resting on a pillow. Reed lifted his good hand in a brief salute. It was not quite regulation. It was more personal than that. Riley raised her hand in return, 2 fingers to her temple, then let it fall to her lap. The door slammed shut. The pilot's voice came through her headset. Harbor Crest, this is Navy 6. Lifting from your roof, thank you for the concrete. The rotors spun up again, faster, harder, until the whole frame thrummed with contained force. The straps swayed. The monitor cables shivered against the metal rails. Riley felt the moment the weight shifted. The skids left the roof. Gravity loosened its hold by a fraction. The hospital dropped away beneath them, shrinking from a building into a block, into a patch of white and gray in a city grid. Through the side window, she watched the parking lot slide by rows of cars, turning into a pattern. Somewhere down there, her car sat with a cardboard box on the passenger seat and a plastic badge catching dust. Beyond the city, the bay opened up sunlight, shattering across its surface. The air smelled different as they turned toward it, cooler, even inside the cabin, as if the promise of open water had found a way in. Riley adjusted the strap of the harness across her chest and let her hands rest, palms up on her thighs. For the first time in 10 years, she was leaving land not as a passenger on a commercial flight, but strapped into the belly of a military bird headed toward a ship where a man she had mourned lay waiting for her to prove that neither of them should have been written off. The city dropped away behind them in a patchwork of streets and roofs and the glitter of windshields. Ahead, the Pacific opened up in a flat, bright sheet, the horizon drawn in a clean line. The helicopter rode the air with a steady shudder. Vibrations climbed up through the floor and into Riley's boots, into her knees, her spine. The harness straps bit across her shoulders when the pilot adjusted their angle. The cabin smelled of fuel-warm metal, old sweat, the faint chemical bite of cleaning agents. Cole unbuckled one hand, reached into a compartment beside him, and pulled out a hardened tablet. The screen came alive under his thumb, a green icon flashing. "Recon feed came in with the med report," he said. "You should see it." He held the tablet out. She hesitated, then took it. The video started with static. Lines crawled over the image, then resolved into gray shapes. The perspective was high, the view tilted down. A collapsed structure filled most of the frame. Concrete slabs broken like snapped bones, rebar, sticking out at wrong angles. Smoke drifted over the scene, thinning and thickening with the wind. Dust hazed the edges. At the center, barely more than a dark blur, at first someone moved. Riley leaned closer. The figure pulled itself forward with its arms dragging the lower half of its body through debris. One leg did not seem to work. Blood marked the path behind him in uneven strokes dark against the pale stone. There was no sound for a second. Then the tablet caught the audio feed. Hiss, crackle, a thump that might have been the drone adjusting altitude. Under the noise, a voice pushed through. "Lone Wolf," it rasped. "Do you copy?" The accent was familiar. The rhythm was familiar. Even with the words broken by effort, she could hear the old cadence underneath. She knew that voice. Her fingers tightened around the edges of the tablet. The plastic dug into her gloves. On the screen, the man pushed up on one elbow and looked toward something out of frame. Blood streaked the side of his face, dried into his hair. His mouth moved again, and this time the audio caught every word. "Do not," he breathed, each syllable dragged out of him. "Let me die out here." The drone camera tracked him for another 10 seconds. Someone off-screen shouted. A flash of light cut across the edges. The feed jittered, then cut to static. Riley sat very still. Cole watched her, saying nothing. The interior of the helicopter blurred at the edges. For the first time in a long time, something pushed up behind her eyes, hard enough to sting. She blinked once, twice, but the burn stayed. "I wrote his name on a wall," she said. The words came slowly. "I carried his dog tags off that ridge and handed them to a chaplain. I told his commanding officer he was gone. I looked his sister in the face and said I was sorry." The engine hummed. The rotors beat the air. They flew on. Cole rested his forearms on his thighs. "You were not wrong," he said quietly. "You gave the truth you saw. The rest was taken out of your hands." She looked at the tablet again. The frozen frame showed Mason mid-crawl, eyes half shut, teeth bared against pain. The call sign chevron on his torn vest was just visible. "Somebody could have she said. "At any point in the last 10 years, an email, a line in a report, anything. Somebody higher up than me decided not to," Cole said. "Operational security, they would call it." She let out a small, humorless sound. It was not quite a laugh. "They saved him," she said. "Pulled him out, patched him up, and then buried the information deeper than his body almost went." "That is one way to put it," Cole said. The tablet screen dimmed. She handed it back. He set it aside face down, as if turning the image away would make the weight of it lighter. For a few minutes, the only sounds in the cabin were engine rotor and the soft clink of gear shifting in its straps. Outside, the coastline curved, then fell away. The city shrank to a smudge. The water darkened from tin to steel. White caps flecked the surface. Riley watched the waves slide by long bands of shadow and light. A voice cut through the cabin, sharp and sudden. "Air unit, this is Sentinel Medbay," it said through Cole's shoulder radio. "Requesting status on incoming personnel." Cole tapped the transmission button. "This is Cole on Navy 6, he said. "We are 10 minutes out. Kane is on board." A small pause filled with static. "Copy, sir," the voice said. "Be advised, Pute has evolved." Riley shifted in her harness. "Evolved how?" she asked. The medic on the other end seemed to hear her tone even through the compression. "Crew Chief Ward is unstable," he said. "Pressure is soft. We are doing what we can. In addition, we have a second inbound from a different extraction. He refuses to give a name. All he says is that he will only talk to Lone Wolf." Cole looked at Riley. She felt the weight of the glance, but kept her eyes on the radio. "Put him on," she said. "Ma'am, comms are patchy," the medic began. "Put him on," she repeated. There was another pause, a muffled exchange in the background, the rustle of a headset being shifted. Then a different voice came through the small speaker. At first it was just breath ragged and thin. Then the shape of words formed. "Riley," the voice whispered. She went cold. It was not Mason. Mason's tone had gravel in it, an edge honed by years of shouting over rotors and gunfire. This voice had always ridden lighter, a little higher, with a joking lilt even when everything else was burning. Now it sounded like crushed glass. "Say your name," Riley said. There was a rusty chuckle barely there. "You used to make people give their rank and the cereal before you let them on the bird," the voice said. "You getting soft on me, Kane." Her heart slammed once hard. "Eli," she said. Cole's brows drew together. He knew that name too. Parker, the voice agreed. Last time I saw you, you were covered in dust and yelling at me to stop bleeding on your kit. The stairwell flashed through her mind, the admission about Ravenfall, the belief in one survivor. Her certainty that the ghosts of that day had names and they were all carved into stone somewhere. You were dead, she said. I held pressure on your neck until my hands cramped. They dragged me away when the wall started to go. You were not breathing. Breathing is overrated, Eli said. The joke came out thin, but it was there. Turns out some very serious people decided I was worth the trouble, pulled me out, closed me up, put me in a different line of work. You know how it goes. No, she said. I do not. On the other end, she heard a cough he could not quite smother. A small grunt of pain slipped through. You will, he said. Maybe, if you walk into this bay in time. Riley pressed her thumb against the padded strap on her chest until she felt the texture imprint her skin. What is wrong with you? She asked. Numbers. Vitals are on the board, Eli said. Medbay can give you the pretty picture. Let's just say the last 10 years were not kind. Some of what they did to keep me walking was meant to be temporary. Temporary stretched a little too long. The medic's voice cut back and overlapping slightly. Ma'am, he came in hypoxic and hypotensive, the medic said. Old injuries, new stress. He insists on staying alert, but he is fading. We have him on oxygen and fluids. He keeps asking if you are real. Riley closed her eyes for a second. The headset pressed gently against her temples. The hum of the helicopter wrapped around her. I am real, she said. Tell him that. Tell him I'm in the air. 10 minutes out. You tell me, Eli said, forcing his way back on the line. I am the one who has been a ghost. She opened her eyes. I am in the air, Eli, she said. I am coming. A long breath slid through the speaker. That sounds like you, he said. The way you used to sound before you decided you were the last one standing. His words hit the same sore place the tablet had opened, but from a different angle. Cole watched her, his own expression shuddered, letting her steer the conversation. The pilot's voice broke into the headset channel. Approaching Sentinel, he announced. Deck crew is ready for us. Riley craned her neck to look out the small oval window. The aircraft carrier grew from a gray smear on the horizon into a solid shape, huge and angular, against the water. Its flat deck stretched long-lined with the shadows of parked aircraft and the ant trails of crew moving between them. As they descended, details sharpened. Orange vests, white helmets, the bright circles painted on the landing area, the angled island rising from the starboard side antennae bristling. Spray rose in bursts from the hull where it cut through waves. The helicopter banked, the deck filled her view. The pilot leveled them out and began the slow, careful drop. Eli, Riley said into the mic. When I get there, you stay conscious long enough to let me look you in the eyes. I carried you as dead for a long time. I would like to change that entry. No promises, he said, but there was a smile in it, faint and frayed. I am stubborn, though. You know that. I do, she said. The carrier deck rushed up. Deck crew flanked the landing zone, arms raised, directing with practiced precision. The skids touched metal with a jolt that ran up through the frame and into bone. The rotors kept spinning, chopping the air. The pilot gave a hand signal. The crewman by the door unlatched it and shoved it open. Noise flooded in louder than before. The smell of the sea was stronger, mixed with jet fuel and sun-baked steel. Riley unsnapped her harness. The buckle released with a heavy clack. Medbay is ready for you, the medic's voice said in her ear. 2 bays prepped, 1 for Ward, 1 for Parker. She pulled the headset off and let it hang around her neck. Her boots hit the deck a second later. The metal was hot through the soles. The wind grabbed at her scrubs. Voices shouted directions that mingled into a unified urgency. Cole climbed down beside her. He raised his voice to be heard over the rotor. This way, he said, pointing toward an open hatch where corpsmen waited. Riley nodded once. She fell into step between Cole and the sailors, the howl of the helicopter at her back and the promise of 2 men she had once buried in her mind. Somewhere ahead in a ship full of strangers who already knew her call sign. The hatch swallowed them in a rush of cooler air and dimmer light. Inside the steel corridors of the Sentinel, narrowed lined with pipes and cables, the deck underfoot had a faint give and sway, the ship moving just enough to remind everyone that they were not on land anymore. A corpsman waited just beyond the hatch, back straight, eyes sharp. Admiral Ma'am, he said. Medbay is this way. Riley followed him through 2 quick turns and down a short flight of steps. Metal rang under their boots. Voices grew louder ahead, overlapping in clipped phrases. They pushed through a swinging door and walked into organized chaos. The medbay was a long, bright space crammed with equipment and people trying not to get in one another's way. Overhead lights glared off stainless steel. The air carried a thick blend of disinfectant sweat and the unmistakable scent of blood that had not had time to dry yet. Monitors beeped in uneven patterns. Curtains hung half-closed between bays. A table in the center overflowed with neatly arranged instruments, tubing sealed packs. "Chief Ward is in 2, someone called. Parker in 4. Riley did not wait for more direction. She headed straight for Bay 2. A curtain hung there, drawn back just enough to reveal the figure on the stretcher inside. Mason Ward lay on his back, bare chest rising in shallow, uneven pulls. Tape marked where chest seals clung over puncture wounds. Purple bruises radiated from beneath the edges of the dressings, blooming across ribs that moved wrong. 2 IV lines ran into his arms, bags of fluid hanging nearly empty on hooks above. A monitor showed a blood pressure that hovered near the bottom of what counted as acceptable and a heart rate working too hard to hold it there. A young medic stood on one side of the bed, gloved hands pressing along the rib cage, eyes flicking anxiously between Mason's face and the monitor. Another adjusted oxygen tubing, turning a dial with quick, nervous fingers. Riley stepped in her gaze, sweeping from head to toe. "Talk to me," she said. The medic straightened. "Blunt chest trauma, ma'am," he said. "Multiple rib fractures on the left. We relieved a tension pneumo with needle decompression in the field, but his saturations keep dropping. We think there is a hemothorax. We have no blood to spare until the next supply run." Mason's eyes fluttered. For a moment he surfaced. "Kane," he rasped. Her name sounded different in his mouth than over a radio. He coughed and the movement tore through him. The monitor reacted with a warning tone. Riley moved to his head where he could see her without twisting. "Hey," she said softly. "You always did find trouble in the most dramatic ways." He tried to smile. It pulled at the cracked skin on his lips. "Knew you would show up," he managed. "You are late." She heard the words under the words. She shook her head. "I had to find a ride," she said. "You did not exactly send a taxi." He grunted something that might have been a laugh. The effort cost him. His chest hitched, then stalled. The left side rose less than the right, the imbalance stark. Riley's tone shifted. "I need a thoracostomy tray," she said, voice firm and clear. 32 French chest tube. More suction canisters. Start a new line. If you have any packed red, find it. If not, get a plasma expanders, at least. A corpsman hurried to obey wheels, squeaking as he dragged a tray closer. Riley slipped into the narrow space on Mason's left hands, already reaching. "You," she said to the medic who had spoken earlier. "You are staying with me. What is your name?" "Lopez," he said. "All right, Lopez. You hold his shoulder and keep those ribs from dancing any more than they already are. When I tell you to release, you release. Not before." "Yes, ma'am." She snapped a fresh pair of gloves from the box and pulled them on. The powder clung to the damp at her wrists. Someone placed a sterile drape in her hands. She shook it out and laid it across Mason's side, leaving exposed only the section she needed. The room narrowed. Noise from the rest of the medbay dropped to background. The light over the bed became the only one that mattered, the rest of the staff blurred to shapes on the edges. Riley palpated along the ribs, counting under her breath. 2, 3, 4, 5. The break in the line where bone had given way. She made a small mark with a pen just above the 6th intercostal space. "This will hurt before it helps," she said quietly to Mason. "Hold on." He tried to nod. The motion barely moved his head. She injected local anesthetic in a fan across the site, then waited a beat, watching his face for any sign of sensation. An assistant handed her a scalpel. The handle fit her grip like something she had not held in a while, but had not forgotten. The first cut opened skin and muscle in a small, controlled line. Blood welled bright, and then darker. The scent hit metallic and familiar. She spread the incision with gloved fingers, separating tissue until she felt the give between ribs. A curved clamp found the intercostal space pushed through. There was resistance, then a sudden soft release as the clamp entered the pleural cavity. A rush of warm air and fluid escaped around the instrument. Dark blood followed, sliding into the waiting basin with a heavy sound. Lopez's eyes went wide. He held his breath. Riley did not pause. "Tube," she said. The chest tube was firm, flexible, cold in her hand. She guided it along the track she had created, feeling for the right angle, the right length. It slid in, then stopped where it needed to. "Connect," she said. The tubing snapped onto the end. The suction canister gurgled to life. Thick, dark red drained, then turned thinner, then less. Mason gasped. The left side of his chest rose, almost matching the right. The monitor showed the oxygen saturation climbing digits, ticking upward in small, steady increments. Lopez let out a breath he had not known he was holding. "You are okay," Riley said to Mason. "You are not going anywhere I am not." He blinked up at her. His pupils focused, then steadied. Left side feels like a truck rolled over it," he whispered. "If you are complaining," she said, "you are breathing again. That is an improvement." A faint smile ghosted across his mouth. His eyes drifted, then pulled back to her. "I saw you on the ridge," he said. The words were slurred with exhaustion, but there was intent behind them. "You stayed on your feet longer than any of us. Thought I was watching a dead woman walk. Not yet, she said. Not then, not now. Do not try to hold a conversation. Let the meds work. He seemed to want to argue, but the fight leaked out of him. His lids lowered. The monitor settled into a more regular pattern. Riley looked up. Keep him monitored every 2 minutes, she said to Lopez. Watch that drainage. If it starts to pour again, instead of trickle, shout. Loud. Yes, ma'am, he said, already scribbling notes on a chart. She peeled off her top pair of gloves, grabbed a clean cloth, and wiped her hands. The skin beneath was damp and faintly red where the cuffs had pressed. Across the bay, Cole watched arms folded expression difficult to read. He gave a small nod, something like relief passing through his eyes. Other bay, he said, tilting his head. Riley nodded back. She stepped out of the space around Mason's stretcher and crossed the med bay toward Bay 4. The curtain there was half closed enough to shield most of the interior from quick glances. A pair of boots stuck out from the bottom heels, hooked on the lower rail of a bed. A low murmur of voices drifted through. Riley pulled the curtain aside. Eli Parker sat propped up against a raised stretcher back. His uniform looked like it had been through a grinder, the fabric torn and stained, rank insignia half ripped. Dried blood streaked his neck and arm. There was a line running into his hand, another taped near his collarbone. Oxygen tubing looped under his nose. Up close, the years sat on him. He was leaner, then she remembered angles sharper. Lines had carved themselves into the corners of his mouth and between his brows. His hair had more gray at the temples. There was a tremor in one hand that he seemed to be trying to hide by curling it into the blanket. When he saw her, the attempt at control failed. His fingers twitched openly. Well, he said, either I'm hallucinating in a very specific way, or you look good for a ghost. Riley took in the monitors first, letting the familiarity of numbers ground her. Blood pressure low but holding, oxygen better than she had expected, heart rate a little fast. Old fracture lines visible on the chest, X-ray clipped to the light board, layered under new shadows. Your definition of good is as bad as ever, she said. She stepped closer within reach, but did not yet touch him. Up close, the scars were clearer. A thick one crawled up from under his shirt collar to his jaw, white and ropey. Another carved across his forearm. These were not the neat marks of elective surgery. These were the lines left when people worked fast with limited tools. 10 years, as she said. And you do not call, you do not write. I tried, he said. Turns out being declared dead complicates the postal service. He laughed once, then winced and pressed his lips together. The tremor in his hand grew worse for a second, then faded again. What did they do to you? She asked quietly. Eli looked past her for a moment, toward the open gap in the curtain where Cole stood. His gaze flicked back to Riley. Different outfits thought I might be useful, he said. Pulled me out of the pile, closed enough holes to get me walking. Sort of. Borrowed me for things they did not put in official logs, none of it designed for long-term health. You could have told someone I was not the only one who walked out of Ravenfall, she said. His eyes softened. If I had reached out, he said, they would have pulled you into the same hole they dug for me. You did your time. You carried more than your share. I was not going to drag you back underground to satisfy my need for a familiar voice. Her jaw clenched. You were not the only one with need, she said. He nodded slow. I know, he said. I heard it in Cole's voice when he said your name over the line. I saw it when I told him to find you. He shifted, pulling his shoulders a fraction higher against the bed. When the extraction went sideways, he said, when I felt things breaking that had already been broken once, I thought, if she's alive, she needs to know she did not fail all of us. Selfish, maybe, but there it is. Riley's throat tightened. You think calling me here is selfish, she said. After 10 years of silence. He smiled small and crooked. I think asking you to look at what they left of me and tell me it was worth it might be, he said. She reached out then. Her hand closed gently around his forearm just above the worst of the scars. His skin was warm and dry. The tremor ran through him and into her fingers. You do not get to decide what was worth it alone, she said. That is not on you. That is not on me. That is on all of us who walked into that ridge and all of us who walked out. He watched her hand for a moment, then her face. For the record, he said, voice thickening, no one there thought you failed. We went down believing that if anyone could drag our stubborn bodies across that line, it would be you. I dragged some, she said. Not enough. You kept us alive long enough for other hands to do the pulling, he said. You think Reed would be on that gurney out there if you had not done the same today? The image of the old man's arm, the blood-soaked towel, flashed through her mind. The ER hallway. The way no one had seen him. You were never meant to carry this as if it belonged to you alone, Eli said. You were the heart that pumped the blood, that is all. The fact that some of it spilled does not mean the heart failed. It was not a speech. It did not sound rehearsed. It sounded like something he had been holding in his chest for a decade, waiting for a chance to say it, and knowing there might never be one. Riley swallowed hard. The tremor, she said after a moment. Is that from before or now? Before, he said. Made worse by now. They patched nerves, cut others. Adaptive medicine, someone called it. Enough to keep a rifle in my hands when they needed it. Do you hurt? She asked. Yes, she asked. Only when I breathe, he said lightly, then he shrugged. So yes. She looked at the monitor again at the lines that marked his heartbeat. I can adjust your meds, she said. Take the edge off without clouding you entirely. Always the balance with you, he said. Enough to help, not enough to take away the lesson. You need your head clear right now, she said. We will deal with the rest one piece at a time. We, he repeated. She met his eyes. We, she said. On the other stretcher, Mason turned his head slightly, though his eyes stayed closed. As if some part of him recognized the shift in the room, the way the air eased a fraction. Riley squeezed Eli's arm once, then let go. I'm going to talk to the team about your scans, she said. See what can be stabilized, what needs real repair instead of temporary patches. You are not in some black site now. You are on a ship with a medbay that answers to people who are looking at you in daylight. He nodded. You sound like someone giving orders, he said. Suggestions, she corrected. He smiled. Orders, he said again softer. Feels like home. Riley adjusted Eli's drip, turning the roller just enough to ease the rate. The monitor responded with a slight softening of his heart rate. Nothing dramatic, but enough. Do not get used to the good meds, she said. They come with nagging. I would be disappointed if they did not, Eli replied. His eyes had slipped half closed, but the line of his mouth relaxed. She checked his oxygen, made a note on the chart at the foot of the bed, then let the curtain fall back into place behind her. The medbay felt different now. The noise level had not dropped. Orders still snapped across the room. Machines still chirped and hummed. Someone laughed short and sharp at something said near the far wall. Yet there was a new current under it all, a sense of eyes flicking toward her, and away the subtle shift that happens when someone in the room quietly changes rank without changing clothes. She went to the sink. Water blasted from the tap colder than the air. She scrubbed her hands, watching the thin swirl of diluted red spiral down the metal basin. Her reflection hovered in the stainless surface of the dispenser for a second, warped around the faucet. Her hair was a mess. There was a faint streak of dried blood near her collarbone where a glove cuff had ridden up. Her eyes looked older than the badge photo that still lay in her car. She shut off the tap and dried her hands on a towel that had lost some of its softness to industrial washing. When she turned, Cole was there. He had taken a step away from the main flow of traffic in the medbay back against a blank section of wall, arms folded. He looked as if he had been waiting for her to hit a pause point. You handled them both, he said. Handled is a generous word, she said. They are not out of danger. They are in less of it, he said. A few hours ago, both of those men were bleeding into unforgiving spaces. Now they are here, breathing on a ship that can move them where they need to go. He let that hang, not as praise exactly, but as a fact. Riley looked back toward Bay 2. Through the narrow gap in the curtain, she could see the flicker of Mason's monitor, the curve of his shoulder under the blanket. In Bay 4, Eli's silhouette shifted as he resettled against his pillows. They were supposed to be gone, she said. Some ghosts find their way back, Cole said. Sometimes all they need is someone willing to open the door. She shook her head once as if to clear the metaphor. If you brought me here only to say thank you, she said, you could have done that on the roof. I do not move helicopters for simple gratitude, he said. You know that. I was afraid of that, she said. His mouth twitched. Walk with me, he said. He pushed away from the wall and moved toward a small alcove at the edge of the medbay where a desk with a terminal sat mostly unused and a pair of stools waited. It was close enough that they could still see the bays, far enough that the noise dropped a level. Riley sat on the nearer stool. The metal creaked under her weight. Cole remained standing for a moment, then sat as well facing her at a slight angle. You are not on my payroll, he said. You do not owe me anything. You do not have to say yes to what I am about to ask. That is a new approach for you, she said. Asking. He accepted the jab without protest. The Navy is building something, he said. Call it a pilot program. We have men and women coming back from deployments with injuries that are not just physical. They run into walls and civilian systems. Paperwork mistrust people like your Dr. Mercer, who see a job title and not the history behind it. Her jaw tightened at the mention of the hospital director, but she did not interrupt. We need a bridge, Cole went on. Someone who understands what it is to stuff gauze into a wound in a ditch and what it is to stand under fluorescent lights in a civilian ER. Someone who can look at a chart and at a person and see both fields at once. Riley watched him, the line between her brows deepening. You want to make me a bridge, she said. I want to offer you command, he said. Of veteran medical operations, a role that would put you in charge of teams that move between worlds the way you have been forced to. The word command settled over the small space between them. Riley let out a breath. I am a nurse who just got fired from a hospital for not knowing how to stay in her lane, she said. I am not sure that is who you want giving orders. You have been giving orders all day, but, he said. In that ER, in this med bay. Everyone listened whether they thought of it as orders or not. They listened because people were bleeding in front of us, she said. That is different. He tilted his head. Is it? He asked. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. The med bay carried on around them. A corpsman hurried past with a tray of syringes. Somewhere, a printer spat out labels. A monitor beeped in a slow, steady rhythm that signaled stability rather than emergency. You do not like offices, Mum, Cole said. You never wanted a desk. I know that. This would not be that. You would spend as much time in places like this as you would in conference rooms. You would train people. You would fight for better protocols on both sides. You would make sure the next Riley Kane who leaves the service does not end up in a hallway where no one sees what she can do. The image of herself standing in Harbor Crest's corridor badge, bright, skills invisible, flashed through her mind. I walked away from that world, she said, partly because it broke, and partly because I broke with it. You cracked, he said. You did not break. People who break do not climb into a helicopter on short notice to put their hands inside someone's chest. She stared at her palms. The skin still felt tender where the gloves had pressed. Tiny beads of moisture collected along the creases. How many people, she asked, who signed my evaluation reports back then, would look at me now and say I am fit for command? At least 2, a voice said from behind her. She turned. Mason stood in the gap of his curtain. He had pulled himself upright, one hand gripping the rail of his bed, the other clumsy with IV lines. The chest tube hung at his side, taped securely. He moved carefully, each breath measured, but he was standing. Lopez hovered at his elbow, ready to grab him if he swayed. You should not be on your feet, Riley said. Tell that to him, Lopez muttered. Mason ignored them both for a moment, keeping his focus on Cole. You put her in charge and you will not regret it, he said. His voice still rasped, but the authority in it had not dimmed. She led on that ridge, whether her rank said so or not. Riley frowned. I patched holes, she said. You led. You patched holes and told us where to move so you could keep us patchable, he said. You yelled at me when I picked the wrong cover. You ordered me to stay down when everyone else wanted to stand up and die faster. You remember it one way, the rest of us remember it another. He shifted his gaze to Riley fully. Nishu, if this is on the table, he said, take it. You are good in the middle of a firefight. You are better when you can shape what happens before and after. Eli's curtain rustled. He was not supposed to be out of bed either, but he had scooted himself just far enough forward that his face appeared in the gap, pale but intent. You should listen to him, Eli said. He has been bossing people around longer than I have, and that is saying something. Riley gave him a look that landed somewhere between affection and reprimand. Both of you are supposed to be resting, she said. We will rest, Eli said. We just needed to make sure you heard more than one voice in this. Lopez shot Riley an apologetic look, as if he should have stopped them and knew he never stood a chance. Cole sat back on his stool and watched the 3 of them, something loosening in his face. This is what I mean, he said. You think command looks like stripes and titles. Sometimes it looks like this. Men who should be flat on their backs, using what little breath they have to push you toward a place where you can do the most good. Riley felt the weight of their gazes. She looked from Mason standing stubbornly at the rail, to Eli half hidden by the curtain, to Cole steady in his seat. Her chest ached in a way that had nothing to do with the ship's subtle sway. You're all very confident about what I should do, she said. None of you have been inside my head at 3 a.m. when the ridge comes back. No, Eli said. But we have been on that ridge. We know what you did. You are the only one who keeps pretending you were not the one holding us together. Mason's fingers tightened on the bed rail. You think we would have asked for you by name if we felt otherwise, he said. You think I would have used your call sign first thing half-conscious if I thought you did not belong back in this fight. The call sign hung there. Lone Wolf, once a weight, now something else. Riley let out a slow breath. She stood up from the stool. For a second, she said nothing. She took in the room instead. The medbay, the staff, the 2 men who had somehow stepped out of her nightmares and into harsh fluorescent light. Cole watching her with the patience of someone who could give orders but had chosen not to, at least in this matter. Her hands curled loosely at her sides. All of you need to be where you are supposed to be, she said finally. In bed, breathing, letting me and the team do the work that is in front of us. Mason opened his mouth to argue. She cut him off with a look he had seen before on sand rather than steel. That is an order, she said. Lopez swallowed a smile and guided Mason back onto his mattress. Eli eased himself down, head sinking into the pillow, eyes still on her. Cole rose as well. When you have finished yelling at your patients, he said, we can talk again. We are talking now, she said. He inclined his head. Then here's where we are, he said. I can have my staff start the paperwork. I can put your name on a line that makes this official. Or I can treat what you did today as a one-time favor, and you can walk back into whatever life you were assembling for yourself at Harbor Crest or somewhere like it. He did not say which option he thought she should choose. He did not need to. The choice is yours, he said. Not mine, not Mason's, not Eli's. Riley looked at him. She heard the helicopter again in her memory, the way the rotors had sounded against the hospital roof. She saw her badge on the passenger seat of her car, the notebook with the lone wolf drawn in its margins. She felt the pull of the ridge, not as a place of death this time, but as the place where something in her had been forged. In Bay 2, the monitor over Mason's bed beeped steadily. In Bay 4, Eli's oxygen line hissed a quiet accompaniment. Her heart beat in time with both. For a moment, no one spoke. The medbay hummed around them, a steady backdrop of plastic rustling shoes on steel monitors marking out seconds. Riley let the sounds anchor her. The ridge in her memory quieted just a fraction. I cannot change what happened back there, she said finally, her voice low. I cannot unwrite 10 years of thinking I was the only name left in a file. She looked at Mason. You are supposed to be resting, she repeated softer this time. He let his head sink back into the pillow, but he did not look away. Riley shifted her gaze to Eli. He had closed his eyes, but his lashes fluttered, as if he refused to miss a word. She turned back to Cole. I can change some of what happens from here, she said. If I take this, it does not come clean. It comes with conditions. His mouth curved just slightly. I would be concerned if it did not, he said. No more buried names, she said. If a medic drags someone out of a hole, they should not have to find out from a recon feed a decade later that the person lived. If you want me in veteran operations, then we do not make people vanish on paper to make reports look clean. Cole nodded once. The nod was sharp and simple, no hesitation. Agreed, he said. I cannot rewrite the classification rules alone, but I can carve out space where they do not chew up the wrong people. And I do this my way, she added. Hands on, in the field when it matters. No one locks me behind a desk to put my name on a door and call it a favor. Your way is the reason I came to find you, he said. She searched his face for any sign of hidden fine print. His gaze remained steady. In that case, she said, feeling the words settle into place as she spoke them, put my name on whatever line you have to. I will step back in. The phrase rang in her chest, oddly familiar. It fit better here than it had in any hospital hallway. Cole exhaled a slow breath that seemed to release a tension he had been holding since he stepped out onto the hospital roof. All right, he said. I will have my staff start the process. You will not see the bulk of the paperwork. You will just feel the effects. Mason closed his eyes, the tightness at his mouth easing. Eli let out a small sound that could have been relief or just a response to the adjustment in his pain meds. Riley flexed her fingers, feeling the faint sting of overused muscles. Do not make me regret this, Admiral, she said. I have been trying not to disappoint you since the first time I saw your casualty reports, he said. I do not intend to start now. A corpsman approached, clearing his throat politely at the edge of their small circle. Ma'am, he said to Riley, we have 3 minor cases and 1 moderate waiting. The team has them stable, but they keep looking over here, waiting to find out who's actually in charge. He glanced quickly at Cole, then back to her. Riley followed his gaze. In the far bays, younger faces turned away quickly when she glanced their direction. A petty officer with a bandage over one eye sat on a stool, swinging his good leg, trying to pretend he was not watching. A junior medic clutched a clipboard like a shield. She could feel the weight of their attention, even when their eyes were on their work. Tell them, Cole said quietly, so I do not have to. She rolled her shoulders, once easing out a knot that had lodged there. You just want to hear it said out loud, she replied. He did not deny it. Riley stepped away from the stools. The deck under her boots had a slight sway, the ship flexing with the waves. It reminded her of long rides in cramped carriers, the way the world could move and still be solid. She walked to the center of the medbay. Voices dimmed a little as she moved. Not completely, but enough. Lopez, she called. He looked up from where he was adjusting Mason's IV, startled. Ma'am, you are taking first watch on ward, she said. You see anything you do not like on that monitor, you get me or whoever is covering my shift. You will not be alone in this bay. Yes, ma'am, he said. His shoulders straightened. She turned to the junior medic with the clipboard. What is your name? She asked. Singh, the medic said. Singh, you are with Parker, Riley said. He will try to convince you he does not need half the care I just ordered. Ignore him. The tremor is baseline. The rest is negotiable. Eli snorted from behind his curtain. Riley, Cole said. She looked back at him. He did not say anything else. He did not need to. Riley drew in one more breath and let it out. Listen up, she said, lifting her voice, just enough to carry to the edges of the room. I know you have your own chiefs and docs. I am not here to replace them. I am here to work with them. For the duration of this mess, if you have a veteran bleeding, breaking, or breaking down, my name is on the line with theirs. She did not use titles. She did not list credentials. She simply claimed what was already happening. "If you need a decision, you bring it to me or to whoever I delegate," she went on. "You do not stall care because you are afraid to cross some invisible line. You speak up, you keep your people seen." A few heads nodded, a few throats worked in quick swallows. She saw recognition in their faces. Some had served with medics like her, some had only heard stories. All of them knew what it meant to have someone willing to put their hands into the space between life and something else. "That is all," and she said, "Asasag, get back to work." The tension in the room loosened. Conversations resumed sharper and more focused. The corpsman who had approached her earlier looked as if his spine had grown an inch taller. Cole stood and came to her side. "You did not say the word command," he murmured. "They do not need the word," she replied. "They need the shape of it." He smiled, brief and genuine. "I will still have to put the word on a form," he said. "That is your problem," she said. He inclined his head and stepped away to confer with another officer who had appeared in the doorway, clipboard in hand. Riley moved back toward the bays. Mason had settled, eyes closed, chest rising in a more even rhythm. The chest tube line burbled softly as residual fluid drained. Lopez checked the connections one more time with the careful touch of someone who had been scared and was now easing out of it. "Get some water when you can," Riley told him quietly. "You are no good to him if you pass out." "Yes, ma'am," he said. She crossed to Eli. He had obeyed her order to lie back at least. His eyes were half open, watching the ceiling light as if it held patterns only he could see. "You heard all of that," she said. "I hear more than people think," he said. "Perks of being the guy in the bed that everyone assumes is asleep. You do not get to use that against us later," she said. "I intend to," he said. "Often." She rolled her eyes, then let her expression soften. "You did this," she said. "You and Ward. You dragged me back in." "Correction," he said. "We pointed at the door. You walked through it." The ship shifted under them. It was a small movement, but she felt it. It was not unsteady. It was simply alive. "Try to rest," she said. "There will be more questions later, from doctors, from people who write thick reports, from me." "I'm looking forward to exactly one of those," he said. She tapped 2 fingers lightly against the rail of his bed in something like a quiet farewell and stepped back. The hours that followed blurred and sharpened by turns. There were charts to read, scans to review, decisions to make about who could ride the line on this ship and who needed transfer to a larger facility once coordination with shore was set. There were calls from other decks, questions about lingering injuries, worries from crew who had seen too much and said too little. Riley moved through it with a focus that felt both new and very old. Her hands remembered pressure points, dosages, the angle of a tube, the feel of a pulse that told more than a monitor. Her mind remembered radio protocols, the rhythm of abbreviated updates, the way to decode fear from flat words. Every now and then in the quiet between tasks, her gaze drifted to the wolf tattoo on her wrist. It did not look quite the way it had when she first had it inked. The lines had softened over time. The wolf's head was still raised, though ears pricked, eyes fixed on some unseen line. Once she had chosen to see it as a reminder that she walked alone. Now standing at the center of a medbay full of people who had called her here, people whose lives had intertwined with hers in blood and dust and salt. It looked different. It looked like a signal, a mark that said in a language not written on any form that she belonged to something larger than herself. Hours later, when the immediate crises had settled and the ship's night cycle began, Cole found her again. This time she was not at a bed or a tray. She was at a small terminal in a corner of the medbay, scrolling through a list of names. "Working already," he said. "Looking," she answered, getting used to seeing more than one survivor on a page. He glanced at the screen, then at her. "We will send a message to Harbor Crest," he said. "They will learn your new title from me, not the rumor mill. They can learn it however they like," she said. "I am done trying to fit into their boxes." "You will need a badge again," he said. "Different logo this time." She thought of the plastic rectangle in her car, its clip catching the light. Then she thought of the name that would be printed on the next one. "Make sure it has enough room," she said. "For what?" he asked. "For all of it, Abba," she said. "Riley Kane, nurse, former SEAL medic, head of veteran operations. Lone wolf when I have to be part of a pack the rest of the time." He nodded. "We can do that," he said. Later, when the medbay quieted further and the ship's night settled outside, Riley stepped to the small porthole set high in the wall. The glass was thick, the view narrow, but she could see a slice of water, dark and restless, threaded with reflected light from the carrier. Somewhere beyond that, the coastline waited. Somewhere beyond that, a parking lot held a car with a cardboard box on the seat and a badge that no longer fit. Behind her, monitors kept their steady vigil. Mason shifted in his sleep. Eli murmured something unintelligible, then settled again. Riley touched the glass with the tips of her fingers, feeling the faint vibration of the ship beneath her hand. She was not standing on a ridge alone. She was not pacing a hospital hallway with her skills pressed into silence. She was in motion with a pack at her back and their lives under her hands. "I'm ready," she said, not loudly, not for anyone else, just enough for the words to exist in the air between her and the dark water. They felt true. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.